Now, Mr. Ho, the U.S. and China have a common goal to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. What is their relationship in trying to solve these problems at this particular moment? Mr. Ho, please.
I think they are talking to each other. Yes. I think they are talking to each other and trying to come to some kind of new agreement on how to move forward on this issue, because as you know, this is a long-standing issue that has not had much progress over a long time. And now, hopefully, with a new US administration, there can be some progress on this issue.
Professor Su, now the latest news was that the Foreign Ministry of China denied that China's special envoy on the DPRK nuclear issue, Mr. Wu Dawei, was in the DPRK for any kind of visit. So that means the DPRK did not grant any permission to the visit of that special envoy. Some people are saying that it's because the DPRK is angry with how should I say, the claimed cooperation between China and the United States. What do you think is the relationship between the two countries, between China and the United States, on the DPRK issue at this moment?
Well, actually, we know that China and the DPRK are the normal relation with each other, right? Even though in the past we have the so-called alliance relation, but now it becomes the, because some problems of the Korean Peninsula issues, or the nuclear issue, or even some problem bilateral relation, so make us just lower down a little bit, so it becomes the normal relations. So, in this context, so China and the United States, we share some kind of common ground to keep the normal relation with North Korea. That means not only China, but also United States. On the one hand, would like to keep the North Korea as a state. So the reason why is officials of the United States say that they would like to respect the North Korea as their normal state and do not conduct a so-called regime change. And on the other hand, both sides, China and United States, we share the common ground that they have the North Korea to commit to conduct its commitment of the denuclearization in their, some years ago, their joint declaration or statement of the September 19th. So regarding this kind of common ground, China and United States, we are do something together to calm down the tension of the North Korea, action to provoke the tension, over the Korean Peninsula, but also we also could respect their survivors of their North Korea.
Okay. Professor Ho, now before the two presidents met in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, President Trump was putting a lot of pressure on China. However, in a most recent interview, he told journalists that after 10 minutes talking to Chinese President Xi, he kind of understood that the situation on the Korean Peninsula is much more complicated than what he thought. From the events, however, that have unfolded on the peninsula following the meeting, do you think the relationship between China and the U.S. have changed in this regard? If so, how?
So the last week, April 15, was the founding leader of North Korea's birthday. So that has really caused a lot of tension to escalate in the region. But thankfully, there was no nuclear test. Thankfully, there was a missile launch, but a failed missile launch. And I think this has really shown how the U.S. Presence in the region has helped to calm things down, and hopefully they can work together on this as well.
Now, speaking of China-U.S. cooperation, the previous efforts go back to 2003 when China initiated the six-party talks. However, the talks ended up with the DPRK conducting more nuclear-related activities. Professor Su, what do you think are the reasons behind the failure of the previous rounds of six-party talks?
We know North Korea, as the very special state, they facing the big challenge from outside of the world, particularly from the Western society and also the South Korea. So the survival for this country is overall goal for this, national governance. But South Korea and the United States always take the target North Korea as the so-called ridiculous and the so-called special state. So they want to conduct the regime change conspiracy. So make North Koreans also, feels, very dangerous, also scareful about their so-called regime change from the South, from the Western society. The reason why North Korea want to take some kind of the pillar for their survival of nations. So, obtains the nuclear capacity is the overall goal for this kind of a state. The reason why, even though they have their six-party talks in the past, even though they have their joint statement, but the United States, the South Korea, or still continues their so-called regime change policy towards North Korea. So makes North Korea always feels the scareful about their, some kind of possible change to themselves. The reason why they always try to pursue their nuclear capacity building.
Mr. Ho, what is your take on this question? Do you think there is any opportunity that any kind of talk is possible in the near future?
I don't think the six-party talks are likely to resume anytime soon because all the parties have been trying, especially China, to push ahead with this over the last few years, but not too much success. And currently, there's no sign that the North Koreans are keen to come back to the six-party talks as well. And it doesn't seem that the North Koreans are interested in this kind of multilateral talks. So perhaps some other new platform may be beneficial to push forward and find progress in this issue.
Well, China has said that it is open to other possibilities, other forms of dialogue or negotiations. What do you think are any practical possibilities, Mr. Professor Su, in your eyes? And is there any possible chance that some kind of dialogue can be initiated, for instance, between the United States and the DPRK, now that the President Trump says its ultimate goal is not a regime change?
Well, for China's foreign policy towards North Korea is always constituencies of their so-called their peaceful negotiation. And we think that it is only way to maintain the stability and to keep their North Korean survival and also to reduce the tension and even avoid the conflict of the North and South Korea. So this kind of policy is still there. But recently there's so much tension over the Korean Peninsula. So make Chinese side, aware very much about the kind of their tensive situation. So Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also said that a few weeks ago that to stop, and the process of negotiation or process of the frame building is our new policy towards the Korean Peninsula issue. Actually, South Korea and the United States in the past already conduct some kind of the very threatening policy towards North Korea. So it's not a very responsible behavior to keep the stability of the Korean Peninsula. So from China's side, we say that on the one hand, the South should stop their so-called military drill against the North, and to the North Korea, they should stop their process of their nuclear capacity building and also the launching their missiles against the others. So this to stop will be the key points for Chinese foreign policy toward the Korean Peninsula issue.
Mr. Ho, what do you think would be the key to any kind of dialogue or negotiations being started if we set aside the six-party talks which have not been working?
I think there are two things we can look at. One is to resume some kind of track 2 talks between the North Koreans and the Americans, which they have done before in the past. I think that would be a soft step to resume some kind of dialogue and let both sides talk to each other to better understand each other's position and to calm things down. And secondly, I also think that since the DPRK is already part of the ASEAN Regional Forum, they should continue to be engaged through this platform, which is already in existence, where all the major parties involved in the nuclear issue are also involved in the ASEAN Regional Forum. So that could be another platform to engage North Korea, to understand their concerns and see how we can calm things down and make progress on this nuclear issue.
As we talk about escalated tensions on the Korean Peninsula and very strong rhetorics from both sides, there have been attempts, let's say, for the two sides, I mean the United States and the DPRK, to contact each other. Now, at the same time, however, do you think, gentlemen, that the United States and the DPRK could back down either side from their entrenched position without fearing losing face, not just with their domestic audiences, but also internationally? Professor Su?
Well, at the moment, there's a very dangerous situation over the Korean Peninsula. We say this is some kind of the chicken games. Because both sides want to take the very harsh attitude towards others. And for example, like the United States already dispatched their so-called armed doors, the fleet, towards the Korean Peninsula area, try to make some kind of deterrent policy towards North Korea. And on the other hand, North Korea, traditionally they have the very hawkish, attitude towards the others, towards the United States and South Korea. So they cannot dare about the threat from the United States, from South Korea. So make them, like there's the two cars move ahead with each other. So it's very dangerous. But I would say that so far both sides have not prepared for the war with each other. So this could be common ground for both sides.
Yeah, Mr. Ho, how do you look at how the situation would develop, especially when we have the upcoming DPRK Army Foundation Day on April the 25th?
I see it as quite a crucial period over the next few days before April 25th, before the North Korean People's Army's Foundation Day. After that, if nothing happens, there's no nuclear tests and there's no missile tests, and the situation, I think, will really calm down, and all parties, North Korea, the US, can really reflect on what has happened over the past few weeks. And I think it's still not too late for President Trump to have a change in slight policy, to be talking to the North Koreans more and to engage them. And he's still quite new into his administration, so there are still options available. He has not been tied down to any particular option yet.
Professor Su, finally, when we are hearing the U.S. Secretary of Foreign Secretary Tillerson talking about Iran, are you suspecting that they have shifted their attention somewhere else now?
Well, for the United States, it's some kind of balance situation for both sides, Middle East and North Korea. Well, but from American officials' words, they said that North Korea is the overall threat to the United States' national security. But I don't think it's really the physical threat towards the United States, but there's some problem for the Americans' national security safeguard, because they want to keep their alliance relation with its friends like the South Korea and Japan. So if there's so much tensive situation in North Korea and over the Korean Peninsula, that makes the big challenge towards the United States to manage its relations with its friends. So I think that at the moment, North Korea is still there on the top agenda for the Americans' foreign policy.